Without further ado, I would love to introduce you guys to our wonderful instructor, Charlotte, who is going to be leading you all through this event of needle felting. Hi, Charlotte.
Hi, everybody. Hello. I'm so happy to be here with all of you. Thank you guys so much for having me. Once we take down that slide, you guys will be able to spotlight my screen just so you can see me a little bit more clearly. But we are going to be making some wonderful autumnal leaves today. Now, I know that it's August. For me personally, I'm calling in from the East Coast. I'm up here in Long Island. It's been so sweaty and hot, but today, just for this event, it's like 65 degrees. It's so weird. So I'm kind of feeling the autumn vibes. I'm ready for Oktoberfest and I'm ready for some needle felting. So for me personally, I'm a pretty creative gal. I do really like art. I love to paint. I love to draw. But you know what's funny is that I've never considered myself to be super crafty. That was never like kind of the direction that I went in. Like if you wanted me to paint, I was ready to paint. But if you wanted me to sew, that was going to be harder. So I think that wool felting is one of the most wonderful things to learn because it's so simple and so effective. You don't need to be artistic. You don't need to be crafty, nothing like that. You just need to be able to hold something and have a little fun. So we are going to be able to make some lovely little leaves by the end of today. And so even if you haven't done this before, I just want to tell you that it's going to be really, really simple and really, really fun. Now we're going to be doing this little autumnal theme. So I want you guys to kind of get cozy, even if you're just using the air conditioner to make yourself feel like it's chilly. If you wanted to grab something nice to kind of, have while you're sitting here, if you want some drink, like a tea or something like that, go ahead and grab it now. If you feel like getting cozy, we would love that. But we are going to be starting our craft now. So what we're going to do is I'm going to pan down my camera and you guys will be able to see kind of what I'm doing over here and what I'm working on. But needle felting is a really wonderful thing. And so one thing I want to show you before I even pan it down is kind of where we're headed. So if you weren't excited already, I want to show you my little leaf that I felted just to kind of demonstrate the direction that we're moving in. So I have my cute little green leaf right here. Can you guys see him? Looks pretty sweet. So this is where we're headed. I did this nice green shade, make sure it's nice and vivid for the camera, but of course we're looking for autumnal leaves. So everybody is gonna have some different colors. So now out there, if you do have a kit, you could have orange or pink or black or any of those colors. So you can really make any kind of leaf you want from any kind of tree your heart desires. If you're like, oh, leaves aren't pink in real life, they are in mine. So if you wanted to make a pink leaf, you are more than welcome to. And we also doled out some different shaped cutters so that everybody will have a different leaf at the end. So we would love to see some pictures in our chat. Once we finish, if you're feeling bold, we would love to see your creations. So let's go through our inventory. I'm going to pan down my camera here, and I'm just going to kind of describe the materials that we have, and I'm also going to talk about how we're going to use them. So we have a couple of things in front of me. Let's go left to right, okay? So over here on the left, I have all these little tubes. Now, these are kind of funny. They look almost like they'd be involved in chemistry or something like that, but this is the best way to ship and keep your needles. So I have 3 different sizes of felting needles. Felting needles are very special. They have a couple of specific things about them that we're going to talk about, but the first thing that you want to know is that they come in different sizes, and you usually start with a big thick needle, and then you work your way down toward a skinny one. So I have size 40 gauge. I have size 38, and I also have a 36 gauge needle. So this is my 3 sizes that I have. This is a pretty standard scale. Now, the smaller the number is, the bigger the needle is. So that means that our 36 is actually our biggest needle and our 40 is our smallest needle. So it's a little counterintuitive, but honestly, if you forget that rule, you could just look at the needles. They do look quite different from each other. So we're going to start off with our smaller needle. So I have a 36 here. So your needles should be labeled if you did receive different sizes. And so you just want to pick the smallest numbers that you're starting with your biggest needle. Okay, so remember that these needles are needles. They're quite pointy. And so before we take them out, we're going to talk about how we're going to use them and some safety and stuff, but just make sure you know which needles you're looking for. Now, I also want everyone to grab some scissors. Small scissors do work the best. These are hair cutting scissors. And so if you have something like that, that would be great. But if you just have regular old scissors like these guys, that would be totally fine. But you do want to have some scissors because it'll help us to refine our shape a little bit. So as you can see here, no matter what shape leaf cutter you got, there are some little edges. Now, I did most of this with felting. Scissors are kind of to get the nice little hairy bits that stick off. And so that's a good way to like like kind of trim everything and keep it together. So some scissors is a good idea. Okay. Now we also have our little needle. Now I have mine loaded into this handy dandy handle. Now you may not have one of these at home, but if you did find any interest in this craft today and you felt really inspired, it's really, really easy to get one of these, and loading the needles inside of the handle does help a lot when you're using it. So this, I'm just going to kind of demonstrate here. There is a little hook at the end of your needle. So if you're wondering why that's there, it's because it's a really nice way to load it into one of these little holders. So in the future of your needle felting career, maybe you want to grab one of these, but this will just help us to kind of have a nice time needle felting, but you don't need this for today. We just wanted to demonstrate one of the cool things that you can have when you grow up and you get to do needle felting all the time. But as far as not having one of those handles goes, that's still completely fine. You would hold it kind of by that hook end. And so there is still something to grab onto. All right, now the next thing down our line, we're looking at these. I have these little leather ones. You might have one different one. You could have two, you could have one. So one is for your thumb. If it's a fat one, it's for your thumb. And if it's a skinny one, it's for one of your skinnier fingers, although mine are a little bit big for this one. So I always have to kind of work it. But this is a really nice thing to have. It's a finger protector. I like to put mine on my middle finger. A lot of people put it onto their pointer finger. This is just a way to protect your fingers. Now, this would largely be if you were holding the thing that you were felting. So if you had it in your hand and you wanted to keep from poking your own fingers or anything like that, it would be nice to have those thimbles. You can also use a sewing thimble. It serves the same purpose. But for today, we likely will not be using those, because using one of these little cookie cutters is actually a much easier way to get a good shape. And it's also a little bit safer because you're kind of blocking the needle from getting to you anyway. So you probably won't need the thimbles, but those are in there just in case you wanted to do any detail work and protect your little fingers. So this brings me to our cookie cutter. Now remember, everybody got a different one. So this is the one that I got. It's kind of like a short fat leaf. You might have gotten a cool pointy one. Maybe we have some bigger ones out there, maple leaves, oak leaves, all kinds of shapes. I just kind of have this silly little guy here. And you can see that the shape isn't exactly identical by the time that you're done, but it's pretty close, right? So we have our little cookie cutter. That's going to be our stencil. And then I have a whole bunch of felt colors just kind of in these little bags just to show you guys. Now, there are tons of colors of felts that you could use. And so if you do feel inspired by this, there's lots and lots of shades out there. You can make anything. You can make 3D things, or you can make our nice little flat things like our leaves today. But we are going to be using some nice autumnal colors, or like I said, if you have a pink or a blue and you feel like using that one, we would love to see it. So I think I'm actually going to be using this lovely yellow color over here. In real life, it kind of looks like the inside of a mango, but on the camera, it's a little bit more autumnal, honestly. So that's perfect. I'm going to be using this because it's already out of one of my bags, but you can go ahead and pick whatever color you would like. And actually, you don't even have to pick just one color. If you wanted to use more than one color, you could make it almost like an ombre effect. So from one color to another, you could even mix them together. And so it's kind of like painting where you can mix your own colors. So there's a lot of really exciting things to do with needle felting. So I'm going to scooch all this stuff kind of out of my way here. The main things that you're going to need are going to be your needle, your stencil, and finally, your foam pad. Now mine, again, might look a little bit different than yours. It should be a piece of styrofoam or something similar. It could be in the little pillowcase like this, but really on the inside, we just have styrofoam. Now this is what's going to absorb the needle. So as we work, we're going to be repeatedly poking the needle through the felt. And what we're going to do is kind of have it land inside of this pad. This way we have something for it to go into. And so this is a very important piece that we need here. It's not just a cute little pillow. It's a very important part of needle felting. So go ahead and grab him too. So these are our main things. And of course, we need our felt. So we're kind of ready to get started here. Just to tell you some applications though, once we are finished, if you wanted to make yours into a keychain or anything like that, you can. You can use up all of your felt and make a whole bunch of little leaves. I kind of feel like this is something I've seen at a craft store before. Like I can imagine my mom coming home with these in a bunch of different colors and maybe putting them into a bowl or something like that. So I'm thinking about making a whole bunch just because they're so beautiful. So remember that you have tons of materials. If you wanted to kind of riff on it, make more leaves, use other cookie cutters, make them into keychains, and you could even make 3D things if you wanted. If you're feeling really bold, the cookie cutter is a great way to start, but if you're feeling really bold, there's tons of tutorials if you wanted to make something more 3D. So let's start our felting project. Now, it's going to be very, very easy. So if you're feeling intimidated, I want you to take a deep breath and just know that this is way simpler than you think it's going to be. And it also helps you with a bit of frustration from life, because what we're going to be doing is just repeatedly stabbing down into the felt. So I want you to get that motion down. Now, remember, I have a little handle. You guys are going to be holding it by the hook, and we're just going to be repeatedly stabbing like this. And once we have our felt all loaded up inside of our stencil, this is a very special material with a very special needle. And so that repetitive motion is going to make our nice solid felted leaf. Now, the way that that works is that there are tiny little barbs. I don't know if you guys can see that. Oh, there they are. See when I get the light just right? There's a couple of little notches along the needle. Now, those are barbs. If we were to look at this under a microscope, you would see amazing things. Basically, there's a whole bunch of tiny needles along the tip of the needle. And if you're very careful, you can kind of feel them when you run your finger on it. You can feel that this is not just a smooth needle. This part is smooth, this part is not. So the reason why that's nice and barbed like that is because every time that you stick it in and then pull it out, you're making knots in the felt. If you were to do this with a smooth needle, you would have to do way, way, way more stabbing, and it also would not work nearly as well. So when you make these little tiny knots, you're basically just compacting together the fabric. So you're forcing it to stay together, and that's why we have this nice, dense little leaf. Now, it's also great because you can kind of force it to stick to itself. So if we wanted to put a little pattern on top of our leaf, or if you were making something else, if you were making a ghost, you could give them a face. If you're making, something you wanted to add pigtails to, or polka dots or anything like that, you could go ahead and do it. It's really nice to make little cats, and you can give them some little pointy features and all kinds of stuff. So remember that today we're making leaves, but there's a whole wide world of needle felting just waiting for you. So let's start our project. Now that we kind of have an idea of what we're heading for, we're going to see how simple this is. So choose your color. When you get the wool felt out of the bag, it's usually kind of folded up like this. You can sort of see that it's actually this much longer piece. You can kind of keep unfolding it forever. It's a very long, stringy bit of wool felt. And so what we want to do is start to separate it. So I'm going to pull off a bit, just a little bit here. And I'm going to start to repeatedly rip it like this. Now, if you were to want to mix colors, let's say you want to mix a custom autumn leaf shade, what you would do is hold the colors that you want to mix in your hand and then rip them together. So I'm just going to stick to yellow here. But if you wanted to make, orange, and you wanted to grab a bit of your red, you could add some red here, you could rip them together. And if you did that long enough, you would end up with a nice orange wool felt that's a custom color. Now that does take a bit of time. And so if you are interested in doing that, just be patient. It always seems like it's not going to work right before it does. So keep going, and that's how you can mix a color if you'd like to. I'm going to stick with just my nice yellow here in the interest of time. But remember too, if you wanted to ombre colors or make stripes, you could put different colors in different sections. For today though, I think a solid leaf is a great way to start. So now that I've kind of ripped this up, what I've done is actually just loosened it basically. So now it's going to be easier to make those knots because we've created a lot of space between all of these little hairy bits. So what we're going to do is pack in to our little cookie cutter. So just kind of loosely pack it on in, just like this. Now it's taking up quite a bit of space in there. It's kind of flush with the top. And the reason why that's happening is because, again, we've really aerated it by ripping it repeatedly. And so now that it's nice and ripped, what we're going to do is push it back down. So we're going to be compressing it now. And this is going to take a couple of different layers of this yellow felt so that we can build up our shape so that it gets nice and thick like this. Now, the first time you do this, it's not going to look like a leaf. The second time, it's not going to look like a leaf. The third, fourth, fifth is not going to look like a leaf. But eventually, you build up enough layers, you build up enough detail, and it starts to look like a leaf. So you're just going to have to trust me. But remember, we're getting out our frustrations here. So what we're going to do is we're just going to repeatedly poke. And I know that that sounds crazy, that that's really all we're going to do here, but it is. This is really all. And in the beginning, you don't need to be super precious about it. You can kind of just poke. And you can see already, I've only made a couple of little pokes here. you can see already it really is kind of compressing. So now it's already quite a bit flatter. Remember, it used to be flush with the top. Now it's really pressed down to the bottom here. And so we're just going to keep going. One thing that's very important to note, though, is that as you're doing this, you are going to be sticking the leaf to the foam pad, which is not exactly our intention. And so we're going to have to continually peel it off of the foam pad so that we're able to kind of keep poking it. So that is going to be a part of this. So I just want to put that out there because we're not going to just continually add felt to this and keep pressing it, because you'll be very, very sad. You will have glued it down to your foam pad and you won't be able to loosen it. So what we're going to do is take a moment here. We're just going to poke and poke and poke until it's kind of uniformly flat and there's no more hairy bits. So remember all those hairy bits? We want to get rid of those. We're just poking. And one sign that you can look for is that the needle starts to leave a little hole. So it leaves a circular hole behind. That means that it's getting nice and compacted and it's kind of reached its compact capacity. I know it's kind of hard to say. Try and say it 2 times fast. But I'm pulling out my needle here and I want to show you guys where we're at. So remember, it's not going to look like a leaf yet. Nobody get upset. We're going to pull away the cookie cutter. And now we have this very silly little yellow blob. It looks a little like a leaf. I don't know. So at this point, you can see it is very much stuck to my little foam pad. So what we're going to do, and you're going to be sad because it's going to look like it ruins it, but I promise it's okay. We're going to just kind of peel it up as gently as you can. But when you peel it, you lose a lot of the definition. So look, we're all hairy again. I promise this is okay. We're going to keep going. But what's important about this is that when you do have it all hairy again like this, you want to take the hairy part and leave it up. So we're now basically flipping it. So the hairy part is the part that we pulled off. So it used to be down. So now we're going to flip it. So it's hairy side up and we're going to put it right back down into the cutter. So just push her back in. Now, take special note of the thickness. I think it still needs to be thicker, especially because every time you poke it, it gets skinnier. So what we're going to do is add a little bit more felt. Now you can make your leaves as thick or as thin as you would like. If you want them to be as thick as this cookie cutter, I guess you could do that. Sounds kind of fun. But if you want them to be kind of more like the one that I have here, I was kind of thinking about it like a cookie. So, you know, when you roll out cookie dough and it's like supposed to be a 1/4 inch thick or whatever, that's what I was going for. And so I'm just going to add a little bit more felt here. So remember, we're ripping. If you wanted to change colors, you could. And now that you kind of have the visual of what we're doing here, you can imagine that if you were to take another color, you could rip, 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 and just put it on the bottom half, and then rip, rip, rip another color and put it on the top half, and then you'd have like a 2-tone. If you wanted to blend the colors in between, you could do that mixing technique and put a little stripe of orange in there. To kind of blend between red and yellow. So there's really lots of different ways that you can do this. But for now, we're going to stick with our yellow and I'm going to stick it back in right on top of that hairy end, because remember we flipped it. All right, so at this point, it's like a monster. It wants to come out of the cookie cutter. And so we're going to poke. All right, so keep poking. I'm just pushing it down. And at this point, we're going to get closer because I think this is going to be thick enough. We may need to add a little bit more felt, but I was pretty generous this second time. I added a lot more because I did want it to get nice and thick. Because the other thing is, the more you stab it, the more firm it becomes. And so if you do want to have a really sturdy, nice little leaf at the end, you want to make it really, really stabbed. And what that means is that you're going to need a lot of felt, because the more you stab it, the smaller it gets. So if you still want it to be of substantial size and thickness, and you want it to be firm, you're going to need more felt than you think. So let's see how we feel. Now remember, we're looking for a couple of signs here. We're poking, and I'm going to keep going until I start to see holes. And I've also realized I've kind of neglected my stem here. So if you have a little stem or any other small little bits that are kind of sticking out, don't forget about them. I need to kind of get in there. I might even need to add more felt just to that spot. So you can see it's pretty simple. It actually reminds me a lot of painting. I don't know what it is. If anybody's ever painted before, you can let me know. It's kind of like if you were painting and it was dry. Like it was no longer a wet activity, it was a dry activity. This is what you'd be doing. It's very easy to manipulate. It's very forgiving. It reminds me of acrylic paint. So you can make lots of different colors. You can really control with a great amount of detail where you put those colors. So we're poking, and I'm starting to see holes in certain areas and not others. So I'm going to pay special attention to the areas where I'm not seeing holes. And this is still just kind of our initial poke. So we're not looking for definition or shape right now. We just are looking for volume. We want a nice compressed, thick thing that we can start to detail into our leaf. I'm calling it a thing. I know. It's affectionate, I promise. It's just a blob right now, that's all. All right, so I've done a whole bunch more poking. See, it's even more blobby now. And you can kind of see too, those holes I was talking about, right? So that means that that is nice and compacted. Now, what some people do is when they get to those holy layers, they actually tend to switch it out for a smaller needle because sometimes that's what the felt is telling you. Now, I like to keep my needle big just because it is a little bit faster. Using a smaller needle takes longer. And so if you wanted to get crazy and be really fancy, you could kind of shift down the size. And remember, a smaller needle is a bigger number. So now I think we're almost ready. This is about the thickness we're looking for, but of course it is not the level of definition. That is not up to snuff. So what we're going to do is pop her back inside the cookie cutter. And now we're going to focus more on our definition, okay? So I'm going to grab just a little bit more of my felt. We don't need much. I'm going to focus it on the areas that are looking a little bit blobby. So remember my sad stem. I'm going to put some specifically right in there as best as I can. And I'm also going to be adding some to my detailed edges. So all those little pointy leafy bits, because that's where we really want to build up some definition. Okay, so just a little bit, keep them inside the cutter. And when you do flip the leaf, once we have a more defined shape, you may also need to flip the cutter just to make sure that it fits. While it was still kind of a blob, though, it didn't matter as much. All right, so now we're getting serious. I'm going to really pay attention to the stem. And one thing that we want to do during this round where we're really trying to be more defined is we're going to be paying extra special attention to the outline. So I'm going to kind of really focus all my poking along the perimeter. This is our detail section. So poke, poke, poke at the perimeter. This way we know that we have some felt in every little nook and cranny so that we have a lot to work with when we start to pull out our detail. It also helps to have those areas be really, really solid because we are going to go in and from the side, we're going to poke those little edges just to make them really, really refined. And you'll know what I mean in a moment, just in case that wasn't clear. But we are going to be poking this way on those little sides. So you can imagine once we pick it up, we'll have a nice little edge now that we made it kind of thick, and we're going to be able to poke right in at those edges. So we need them to be very solid. So that's why I'm really, really focusing. I'm pulling some of that loose felt with my needle over to those sides, and I'm making sure that I'm getting a really nice defined edge. Now, one thing that's very important about your technique while you're poking, I know it's really fun to just kind of do it really wildly, but you do actually want to keep the needle very vertical if you can help it. The little barbed end of the needle is much thinner than the base of the needle. And so it is more likely to break. And in fact, it happens all the time. So don't feel bad if it does. That's why there's tons of needles. And any felting kit that you buy would never give you one needle. That would just be cruel. They break all the time. And they tend to break if you go in at an angle. They just kind of snap off just the very end. And so we want to make sure that we're kind of keeping things vertical to the best of our ability. I broke a lot of needles when I was first starting out, and now it hasn't happened in a while. Maybe today will be the day. I don't know if I just jinxed myself. But I think once you get this really vertical repetition down, it helps a lot. So I'm poking. I've done the outside quite a bit. You may not be able to see on camera, but I can tell that the outside is much more poked than the inside. It's a darker color, it's more compressed, there's more holes, it's flatter. So now I'm trying to be nice to my inside bit and make sure that everything is kind of even, but I'm still paying really special attention to those edges. Okay, so we're poking. I'm gonna go right through the middle. I wonder if you guys can hear the poking sound because it's like ASMR over here. But I do want to just give you guys the next instruction. So I'm just going to keep poking like crazy. I'm getting into that center section. And because I picked yellow and because there's holes in it now, it almost looks like cheese. Or maybe SpongeBob. Who knows? He's always on my mind. So we've given it some nice little pokes. Now let's talk about our shape. We've really got that nice outer edge. And another thing that's good is to hold down the cookie cutter while you do this. That's going to be very helpful. You really want to keep it in one place. So obviously when you pull it up off of the felting pad and you have the cookie cutter kind of loose and you're just holding your little blob, that's okay. But once you do set it down and you start poking, you want to make sure that it is in the same spot until you pick it up again. This will keep your edges really, really clean. All right, so at this point, let's pull off the cutter. All right, so we have more of a leaf shape now, right? It kind of looks more like a leaf. So I'm gonna pull this off, and now we're gonna do something a little bit different. I'm pulling it off. Now we have this super hairy side. I'm gonna flip it, and I'm gonna start without the cookie cutter to just put in the hairs. So I'm very lightly putting in that hair bit. Now I do this without the cookie cutter just because this is sort of an in-between step. We don't need the cookie cutter just yet because sometimes the hairs end up covering up our detail. So I like to be able to see at this point. And I'm kind of using my needle to fold the little hairy bits toward the center just so that I can get them to calm down a little bit. You know, it's like when you do your hair in the morning, it can be pretty crazy. All right, so we're poking. Now that I've got all those little hairy bits a little bit more tucked than they were, we're going to put it back into the cookie cutter. And I'm going to pay more attention now to the direction that I put it in. I want to make sure that the leaf is going in the right direction. So my little leaf has kind of an angle to the side. There we go. Yeah. Okay, so remember we had to flip the leaf and the cookie cutter now together. Okay, so now I'm doing some shallow poking. I'm not quite poking all the way through. So remember, I used to be making contact with the board underneath. Now I'm doing very shallow poking like this. Okay, so you can see I'm just very shallow, and this is how I'm going to compact in all those little hairy bits that were sticking, and I'm going to make it so it doesn't stick again. So now I'm actually leaning forward. I know you guys can't see my top half, but just trust me, I am. I'm leaning forward over the top of it because I really want to get in those edges. I'm looking for those details now. You thought I was doing that before, but now it's serious. I'm really, really pushing those in. And remember, we're poking very, very shallow with the needle. We're probably not even making it through to the other side too much. We just want to get those hairs in there and make this side as flat as our other side. Okay, so some nice shallow pokes, looking at that shape. We're going to start refining the shape after this. So remember I told you it was going to look like a blob for quite a while, and then eventually we were going to have a leaf. So very, very shallow. We'll pull off our cutter. We missed some hairy bits over here. Okay. Now, when I lift it up and off, it comes off much easier because we did such shallow poking, right? So now we have this. This almost looks like a leaf. It's a little bit crazy though. So what we're going to do is try and refine the shape a little bit. So this is what I was talking about, where we're now going to be poking at the sides. So this is where you might want to wear one of your thimbles, maybe a thumb one. You actually want to put them onto your non-dominant hand that you are not poking with. Sometimes I just automatically put stuff onto my dominant hand, but it's not a good idea here. You do want to have it onto the hand that you're going to hold your leaf with. And I'm going to be poking at the side. So this is my flat leaf. Now I'm going to poke at this narrow side. We're going to start to pull out our shape a little bit. Okay, so we're just kind of poking. Okay, so we're poking here. And we're getting our shape. So I'm going around and around. And I'm just gonna get my nice little edges here. So this is the part that's really gonna make it, oh, I poked myself, it happens. This is the part that's really gonna make it look like a leaf. So we're gonna pull in those edges. And one very important part, if you have any of these cute little kind of bumpy creases, I'm gonna focus the needle right on that point. So you see how this is one of my little leaf creases? I'm poking really extra hard in that part. And that's what's going to pull the felt into the shape. So now I've really defined that little rounded bit here. So I'm going to do that all over. Okay, so we're just going to poke, 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 being really, really gentle, trying to get all those little ridges. If you have a leaf that's a little bit more of a complicated shape, this might be a little harder. This leaf wasn't so bad. So I'm just going to kind of poke at the side here, and this is what's going to define our shape. Okay. So we're pulling in these edges. And if you start to lose the shape, you can look at the cookie cutter, or even put it back in to start to have a better understanding, because sometimes it's so blobular that you lose the leaf. So sometimes I like to look at the leaves I've already made, or I'll look at my cutter just to remember, remind yourself who you are. Okay, so I'm just going to poke right in this side bit to pull in that edge. Make things nice and round. Now, one thing I want to mention is that it's important to poke evenly. So if you have one section that you have poked more than another, they're not going to look the same. And it's very hard to unpoke something. You can try to loosen up the felt by kind of ripping at it a little bit, but generally that's not super successful. And so what you would have to do is adhere to the most poked area. So if you have one area that's very, very poked, you're going to need to super poke the rest of the leaf. And so that's why I like to keep the needle moving. I don't really linger in one spot for too long. Okay, so I'm just getting all these little shapy bits on the side. And this is not only going to refine the shape, it's also going to make it just a little bit smaller. The whole leaf overall is going to be smaller because we're bringing in our edges. Okay, and now we have a much more refined leaf shape. You guys see that? Okay, so if you wanted to now, you could go in with your scissors, just in case anything is a little bit hairy or not as defined as you'd like. This is why I like to use little tiny scissors. So hair cutting scissors are kind of your best friend here. And I'm just going to be snipping out these little edges a little bit. Okay. So I'm using these little scissors. And I'm just kind of cutting right along the edges. Now, the thing about needle felting is that it's always going to look a little bit rustic. That's why it lends itself very well, not only to this like fall decor, something kind of woodsy, but if you've ever seen people make like cats or bunnies or anything like that, it really works out well for little animals and stuff because they're so fuzzy. So don't get crazy. It's never going to be perfect. And that's what's kind of nice about it. Oops. But I've made my little leaf. Now, if you wanted to add on some details, like if you wanted to give it the vein of a leaf or anything like that, I love fuzzy too. You could, if you wanted to grab a darker color, what you would need to do is take your felt and grab a very little piece of it like this, roll it into a snake in your hands, give it a nice little twist, and then you would lay it down and just poke right into that line. And that would be one of the last things that you did. So if you did want to do that with a darker color, you're more than welcome to. I kind of like them plain like this because together they look very cute. So we could kind of have a whole bunch of little leaves of all different shapes and colors. And so it's a great thing to do to decorate a little bit. Okay, so that was our lovely needle felting. I hope that you learned a thing or two. It's so fun to do. I almost wish we had more time. I want to keep going. I want to make more leaves. I want to make more colors. It's such a wonderful thing because you can make anything. So it's a really, really nice thing. Yep, and the keychain too. So the keychain is another option if you wanted to make one. My friend in the chat box made an orange leaf, which sounds beautiful. So thank you so much for following along with us. This was really fun. You have so much much more felt. So, you don't need to keep making leaves. If you want to, you can. But if you wanted to kind of, grab a cookie cutter from your cabinet, something from a long time ago, you haven't made cookies in a while, but you got a cutter, maybe a star, anything like that would be wonderful. So let us know what you make. We would love to see it. That's it for me, though. That's it for our craft. You can kind of just, put your needles back into their little tubes, keep everything together, and then the next time you want to do it, it's ready to go. It's another reason why I like needle felting is that there's very minimal setup and cleanup. So let me pass it back to Tatiana, but thank you guys so much for being here. I hope that you had a wonderful time. Yes, get those Halloween cookie cutters. I hope that you had a wonderful time. I definitely did. So I'm going to pass it off to Tatiana, and she's going to close us out. So thank you guys so much for being here.
Thank you so, so much, Charlotte. That was so cute. I love the leaf. It looks absolutely stunning, absolutely stunning. And it really calls in that fall vibe that we're looking for. So thank you guys so much for joining us today on our Crafter community event. This is a free virtual workshop that's open to all. So definitely feel free to share this information with your friends, with your family members, with your colleagues. We are also going to be having some more workshops coming up in case you guys are interested and want to spread the love with other people. We are going to be having, we're going to have a free workshop on September 4th. We're going to be having some llamas live with us. So definitely join us for that. We're also going to be having an event on September 18th and on October 2nd. Very good. I'm super, super, super excited for that, but I'm super, super excited for the holidays because we are going to be having some holiday events, which are coming up next. Aren't those llamas adorable? Oh my goodness. It literally, every time I watch that, literally my heart just feels like it's going to explode. Thank you guys so much for being here, and we can't wait to see you guys for these upcoming holiday events. But we definitely have some more events coming along in case you guys want to join those. And last but not least, we would like to tell you guys about our Crafter Club, which is a premium virtual event subscription for remote and hybrid teams. So I'm going to be sharing some links with you guys in our chat. If you guys would like to follow us on Instagram, please do so. We love, love, love to have new followers. And if you create something, feel free to tag us because we love to see everyone's work. You can also follow us on LinkedIn. We do have a LinkedIn profile, of course, because hello, who doesn't, right? And we also have more events. So if you are interested in learning more about the upcoming Crafter community events, you can have the link there as well. And for the Crafter Club link, if you're interested in learning more about the subscription and how it works, feel free to click on that last link and learn a little bit more about Foodcraft and all of the wonderful things that we have to offer. So we are done here for today, but thank you guys so much for being here. We're super happy that you guys joined us, and we hope that you enjoyed needle felting today because honestly, it's such an awesome craft to create. So have a wonderful rest of your day, everyone, and we hope to see you guys soon. Take care. Bye.